Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Now, how about, if we're honest, how many of you, hands up, anyone has made any New Year's resolution this year? Anyone? Yes, there are some honest people here. Fantastic. Well, I'm sure that most of us at some point in our life have made a New Year's resolution. Some of my friends have been telling me different things, different plans, ideas that they have decided to either give up or change or modify in their life. And some of them, as I'm sure you know, are pretty humorous with what your friends say. Probably one of the funniest ones I heard was my friend said, this year I am going to do less laundry and wear more deodorant. Those are the friends that you want to stay away from. Well, it's good to be here. And here we are in a brand new year, January. We stand here as a community and we have no idea what God will do or bring to us over the upcoming months. The same goes for our personal life, for our families. And so this week I was thinking what a great opportunity it would be for us to talk about purpose. To challenge ourselves with purpose as a Christ follower and see what is the objective? What is the goal for a Christ follower? And what can I do in this brand new calendar year? I looked up the definition of the word purpose, and it means a few things. The reason for which something exists or is done, made, used, etc. Number 2, an intended or desired result, end, aim, goal. And number 3, it's determination, resoluteness. The passage today is so jam-packed with purpose that we could spend so much time unpacking it. And so that's why I chose it. So I want us to set the scene in Luke chapter 4. I want you to imagine Nazareth. What do we know about Nazareth? Very small location, very insignificant. We are often familiar with the phrase in the Gospels when they were referencing Jesus and they said, could anything good come out of Nazareth? We go into some towns and cities, and as you drive into the city, there's a big sign, welcome to such and such a place, population, and then they have what they're proud of. Home of Wayne Gretzky. Home of Hazel McCallion. Well, I think maybe if you were to drive by Nazareth, you might see a sign that's similar to that. Oh, and by the way, don't let the peppers throw you off. This is a heavily modified Photoshop picture, so don't go home and say, I never knew that Nazareth was the mecca of hot peppers. But let's set the scene. Not much to brag about. James Strange, the American archaeologist, puts the population at Jesus' time around 480 people, less than 500 people in a forgotten location without much to brag about. Imagine you were there that day in the temple when you had heard word come back from Capernaum of one of your own, Jesus, who had been inspiring people with his words and his actions, who had been stirring in people's hearts the opportunity to dream a new vision. And that person has come home and is standing in your midst, ready to speak and share. Can you imagine the magic which must have been in the air at that day? Can you imagine the anticipation for the people when it was this hometown boy done good has come home? I'm sure if you were there that you would have expected that if Jesus had performed and said and done things that inspired people in a foreign place, that he saved the best for the hometown crowd. What a moment. And then Jesus stands up in the midst of probably most of the people that he was familiar or knew there. He opens the scroll of Isaiah and he reads. Now, we need to grasp the significance of what Jesus is reading. It's just on its own merit when you read it, it's such a passionate passage. But it is so full of history. Folks, what Jesus unveils and reads that day can go right back through the history of God's people. It begins with Isaiah 61. What was going on? The speaker in Isaiah 61 was talking about God's people who at one time turned their back on God. They were no longer living the way God intended. And so God had brought another nation to capture them, take them into exile. They lost the promised land. They lost their identity and their hope and were taken and became slaves. And then at one point, through the prayers of a few godly people, God softened the heart of a new king and allowed God's people to come back, to rebuild the temple, to rebuild the nation Israel. So Jesus, speaking in Nazareth, takes us back to this time where God calls his people back out of exile. It is a message of redemption. But it doesn't end there. For in that passage in Isaiah 61, they make reference to the year of the Lord. You know, the Message version is a little bit of a watered-down translation, but I love what it says. It says, "This is the year for God to act." How powerful is that? And that reference goes back to Leviticus 25 and the law of Moses in the year of Jubilee. What was the year of Jubilee? Oh, an amazing economic system dreamed up by the creator of the universe, where every 50th year for God's people, debts were forgiven, slaves were released, people who had lost their property were able to reclaim it. Can you imagine if you were someone who became poor and had to sell your property, and then you were so poor that you had to sell yourself into slavery? What an amazing God. What an amazing plan of redemption when you knew with the year of Jubilee, debts were forgiven, people were cared for, people were forgiven, the poor were cared for. What an amazing thing. Shane Claiborne, in his book titled Jesus for President, says this about the year of Jubilee. If I can get here. It's not working with me. He says this: Jubilee was God's alternative economic system of sharing, debt cancellation, and land redistribution. It was to release the prisoners and the oppressed and the dismantling of inequality. Jesus harkens back even to the year of Jubilee in Leviticus 25. And yet he takes it even further. This plan of redemption with God goes back right to Genesis 12 in the covenant that he makes with Abraham. Do you remember what he said to Abraham? You and your descendants will bless the nations of the world. Jesus, with one passage, goes right through the history of God's chosen people. Jesus does not disappoint when he shows up in Nazareth. Things are going well at first. We read that the people that were sitting there in that temple were amazed, were shocked at how gracious Jesus' message was. But then it gets messy. Jesus says, "Truly I tell you," which is another way for Jesus to say, "You're not going to like this." And Jesus goes on to reveal the broad scope of his plan of redemption. And he uses two illustrations in which the enemy, the foreigner, the Gentile, are blessed by God, not God's chosen people. He lets them know that God's plan of redemption goes beyond them, even their enemies. Now, this was enough for them. They screamed in a tirade and grabbed Jesus and yanked him out, and they went to throw him off the cliff. Why? Why did they do this? Well, we need to realize that they weren't interested in grace and mercy for their enemies. These people, these proud people of God, were once again under the occupation of the Roman Empire, who were taxing them to death, and they hated them. They believed that one day the Messiah, the chosen one, the Savior, the person that was prophesied all through their scriptures would come to do what? The Messiah would come to rescue them from their enemies, elevate them above all others, and give them safety, peace, comfort. They were not interested in grace and mercy for their enemies. They were under the Roman Empire's rule. Jesus' picture of grace and redemption went well beyond their thoughts and dreams and included their enemies. Everyone. It was a plan for the entire world. Point one is this. Our purpose in this world is to be world changers who live out God's plan of redemption and restoration for all of God's people, for the world. Do you realize that? When Jesus came into this world, when He stepped into Nazareth, He declared to the hometown people His mission for the world. And He declared that He was the fulfillment of God's plan for the world. Folks, if Jesus is our rabbi, if Jesus is our teacher, if Jesus is our Savior and example, He set the example for us to be world changers. When we come to Jesus, when you sign up, when you buy in, when you say, God, invade my life, we're not signing up for some part-time gig. We're saying, God, here I am. Lead me and to make a difference in this world. You see, our purpose, our ultimate purpose as followers of Christ goes beyond being a mom, a spouse, an employee, a CEO. Those are all important things, aren't they? I look at Krista, who looks after our 4 children. You can imagine the terror that goes through our house on a daily basis. The odd time that Krista decides to go out with her friends, usually from her mom's group or whatever, and she says, okay, John, I've written everything on the board. You need to take care of the kids. I'm calling 911 in a couple hours. So we can appreciate what we do. We can appreciate the roles that we have in this world. To be a mom, a CEO, a spouse, significant. But folks, they pale in comparison. To be a world changer for Christ, they pale. Lance and Kelly Dixon were over at our home this week. And we had a dinner, and then I sat down with Lance, and I was sharing with him a little bit about the message today. This would be my best impersonation of Lance. Of course, imagine someone who's about 12 feet taller and a much deeper voice. And I was sharing with him about this in the passage, and Lance is sitting here with his eyes closed, right, in heavy meditation. Right? And he says this, John, we were made to make a difference. And isn't that true? You and I were made to make a difference in this world. When people followed a rabbi, and Jesus truly was a rabbi, when the Spirit led him in his life, and Jesus just absorbed the Scriptures, was so knowledgeable about the Scriptures, and he was living this perfect life, and then became a rabbi and had these disciples who followed him. You know, when someone was the apprentice of a rabbi, they didn't want to just know what the rabbi knew. They wanted to become like the rabbi. That's why we hear the reference of the disciples of a rabbi. They were always listening. They were always trying to be close to their rabbi because they never wanted to miss anything. So they would always walk so closely behind their rabbi, which is why the dirt from the sandals of the rabbi would kick up in their face. And by the end of the day, if you were a disciple that wanted to learn and be like your rabbi, you were coated in the dust and the dirt from your rabbi's feet. Folks, Jesus is our Savior, and Jesus is our Rabbi. And we, as His apprentice, need to follow His example. UTI, our youth group, for several years have held up the banner, another world is possible. We are going to change the world. Mark Leach comes here a few months ago, and I love it. He comes here, and what does he say to all of Trinity? We are a community who are going to change the world, what? One person at a time. Mark says we are world changers, and that is exactly the way God views us. Point 2 is this. Changing the world is a costly adventure. Look at Jesus' life. He led a mission of ultimate grace and redemption. He not only rescued us from the bondage of sin to bring us back into standing with our Creator who loves us, but He truly lived the life of loving the poor, the prisoner, the sick. And that mission of grace ultimately cost Him His life. Jesus was in the trenches. Jesus sacrificed. We read about how Jesus lowered Himself to become a servant. And He did so to set the example. He warned His followers, did He not, to take up their cross and follow Him, and that to be His apprentice meant sacrifice, pain, loss, and servanthood. The life of a world changer is hard, is messy, is full of service and pain. And that is what the Christ follower signs up for. One of the things that saddens me, I was raised in the church my whole life. And I've been in numerous denominations. I have developed many friendships in different denominations, in churches, Bible college, seminary. I have many friends who are in church ministry as youth pastors and worship pastors and lead pastors. And one of the things that saddens me as I look back is how many times people were given a misunderstanding of what it meant when we asked Jesus to lead us. Many times people or churches have presented it as if it's our candy jar to God. What do I mean by that? It means that when I accept Jesus, God is going to come and make me safe and happy and comfortable. God, here I am. Now come and solve my problems. Give me better health, a great job, security, prosperity, peace, and personal joy. And yet, when I look through the Scriptures, when I look through our history as a Christian church, I don't see that. Instead, I see people like Jesus giving up His life for the cause. I see the disciples and the apostles giving so much for the cause. I see Martin Luther King giving up so much for the cause. I see Mother Teresa giving so much for the cause. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, so much for the cause. And we can go on and on and on of people who have allowed God to invade their life and say, I am here to be a world changer for you, Rabbi. Ultimately, being a Christ follower is not about me. Unlike the constant drum of our culture that tells us I am the most important person. I need the things to make me happy. I should not be inconvenienced. Jesus invites us to another plan. We are to love, to live out the grace to the poor, the oppressed, the needed, and the lowest of the low in our society, to partner with God in His plan of redemption. This is what Jesus did throughout His entire ministry, and He set that as an example for us. How many people here are familiar with the TV show called The Hour by George Stroumboulopoulos? Hugely popular show with young people in Canada. A few years ago, I don't know if you watched this episode, but he had Tony Campolo. I love Tony Campolo. He had Tony Campolo on, and he was talking about what it meant to be a Christian. And I'm going to show you a very short clip here of what the response was from Tony.
I contend that we got to get together. I see you got the white band on with Bono, and here's a guy who's a rock singer who has done more to articulate what Christianity is really about than most of we preachers. In fact, he says to be Christian is to commit to the poor, to the oppressed. The only description that Jesus gives of Judgment Day is how we treated the poor. On that day, he's not going to ask you theological questions. He's going to, it's not going to be virgin birth. Strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree. It's not going to be. Yeah, undecided. It's going to be. Here's what it's going to be. 25th chapter of Matthew. I was hungry. Did you feed me? I was naked. Did you clothe me? I was sick. Did you care for me? I was an alien. Did you take me in? What you failed to do to the least of these, you failed to do it to me, because I'm not up in the sky somewhere. I'm waiting to be loved in people who hurt. And as you relate to people who hurt, you're relating to me. There is no Christianity that does not tie us up with the poor and the oppressed of the world.
So Tony reminds us back to Jesus' message when he declared his mission to those people in Nazareth. That as Christians, we are to care for the least. We are to sacrifice for those who are needy. Now, you may be here and say, Tony, you're only telling me half the story. And that may be true. But you can't erase the 25th chapter of Matthew. Jim Wallace, who is the founder of Sojourners, calls this passage that we're looking at today the Nazareth Manifesto. And he says this: whatever the gospel does, it changes your life. It heals your addictions, cures your family's brokenness. It's all wonderful. But if it is not good news to the poor, it is not the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is a reminder that as Christians, we are here to live through God's plan of redemption, to bring people back to God and also meet their needs and care for them and love them in this mission of grace. And His grace is to be poured out to those who we may even dislike, or dare I say it, hate. Maybe the person at work that you can't stand. Maybe that family member that you have to entertain conversations with over the holidays. Maybe at this time, even your spouse. Our purpose is to demonstrate this grace, to live this mission to people that we may not even feel deserve it, just as Jesus challenged His hometown crowd. Why would Jesus ask us to sign up for this? Why would Jesus make this such a difficult job? We of all people should understand the meaning of grace. And we should be prepared to give it out freely, because you and I, those of us here who have accepted Jesus, those of us who have come to Jesus and allowed His Spirit to invade us, are the people of the second chance. Are we not? We are people who everything we have and our right standing with God is nothing of our own. It is all done out of grace. Everything. Grace. You and I fall under grace and mercy. None of us can claim that we deserve it. Therefore, if we are people of the second chance, we understand grace. We need to live it out. The final point is this. If we do this, fulfillment is found through a life dedicated to the mission. We will find fulfillment through this committed life to Christ's mission. People are looking for fulfillment. We are looking for fulfillment. This culture is looking for fulfillment, and often, if we admit it and we look and we hear the sound and the voice of culture, our culture usually looks in the wrong place to find it. We're told about fame. That will give us fulfillment. Fortune, materialism, popularity, comfortable lifestyles. But I am convinced that for the Christ follower, they will find true fulfillment through living out a life of sacrifice and dedication to the plan of God. Now, don't laugh at me, but over the holidays, I love watching documentaries. Chris and I, we get on Netflix all the time and we watch documentaries. And I especially love watching documentaries of normal people that have, unique stories. So we were kind of desperate, and we found this one over New Year's with our friends, and we decided to watch it, called The King of Kong. And the story tracks with two gentlemen who have spent the last 30 years as their sole purpose in life to hold the highest score in Donkey Kong. A game that came out in 1981. And you see them battling back and forth. And this documentary tracks how, they spend the majority of their time on Donkey Kong. One gentleman who is a father, husband, goes into his garage where he has the big arcade unit. And he spends hours and hours and hours logging into Donkey Kong to jump a couple more barrels so he can hold the Guinness Book of World Records for Donkey Kong. Now, here I was this week about to speak on purpose, and I thought, wow, for me to spend 25 years in my ultimate purpose when I look back to say I have the high score in a video game. We may laugh at that. Probably should laugh at that. But I wonder if we have a look at our life and we evaluate why we get up every morning and what we do. If we look and say, if I map out my life, what is the purpose that I am showing that I am living for? I wonder what we would think. I wonder how we would feel. Would we say, this motivates me every morning because I have extreme purpose? Or would we say, I'm dedicating my life for that? Jesus calls us to a life of purpose in the trenches, working and caring for people where it will hurt and it will cost us. My friend Alan Beatty works at a ministry downtown Toronto called The Sanctuary. Anybody familiar with The Sanctuary? Awesome. Amazing ministry. They work with homeless people, and their goal is to actually give them community, not just necessarily give them homes. They said you can find someone a home, but if you don't give them community, they will be back out in the street. They give them community. They have their own baseball team. They had a meal where on Saturday mornings, if you came down as a church group, which our youth group would do, the homeless would serve us, and you would sit with the homeless people and have incredible conversations. I talked with Alan, who's on the front line, where many people would say, man, I could never do that job. He took a huge pay cut to work there. He leaves a part of himself every day at work. It's messy, it's rough, it's dangerous. He's dealing with drug-addicted people, violent offenders. He goes into the rough areas of our city. And many of us would probably think, I can't do that. You know something? When I talk to my friend Alan, who's in the trenches in the front line, Alan would tell you, I would do nothing else. I would do nothing else. Why? Because in the midst of the chaos and the mess, when he comes out of the trenches and he comes home and he still has the emotional baggage of all the people that he's trying to love, he finds fulfillment. Because he is called to live out a purpose. Paul in Philippians chapter 1 says this, and I love it. Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. Then, whether I come and see you or only hear about you in my absence, I will know that you stand firm in the one Spirit, striving together as one for the faith of the gospel, without being frightened in any way by those who oppose you. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but to suffer. Not only to believe in him, but to suffer. Christ has called us to be world changers. World changers cost, sacrifice, give. You and I this morning gather together as a people who have been forgiven much. People who continue to have been and be forgiven much. All the things we do in private or in public, all the things we do in private, that dark, deep closet that I have, that we all have. Grace has wiped it out. Grace has removed it. Grace has given us our mission. We understand grace because we are the result of grace. I finish with this story. Several years ago, I left church ministry, and I was working my way up through a company for about 5 years, and something was tugging at me of where I was not doing the purpose that I was called to and using my gifts appropriately. And I was being challenged to go back to church ministry. But it was very difficult. I had a great job. I had lots, they paid very well. I had all my nights free. I could actually leave all my work at the door. You don't get any of those things in church ministry. It's tough. And I was challenged by this. And I had an opportunity to talk to Tony Campolo to get his opinion. My friend Colin McCartney, who runs Urban Promise Toronto, called me up. Once a year, he would bring Tony in to do a fundraiser for Urban Promise. And he said, John, Tony's coming in, and I'm just going to have a couple friends to have dinner with him before he speaks. Would you like to come? Sign me up. So I got a bunch of friends. I got Krista. I got Krista's mom, Bianca. We all got in this big, huge van thingy, whatever, and we came down. And the whole time I was raving about, oh, by the way, while you're sitting in the auditorium, I'm going to be having, sharing cheese sticks with Tony Campolo. And raving about it, gloating about it. So we get there a little bit late, which shouldn't surprise any of you who know me. We get there, and I go running through the church building stuff. I come into the room, and there's Colin, and there's no Tony. I said, Colin, where's Tony? Well, you're late, man. Yeah. Well, it was just a quick little thing. Tony's gone. He went out. I'm like, oh, come on. So here I was, deflated, waiting to meet Tony. Meanwhile, Krista and her mom Bianca and all the other people that we brought decided before Tony spoke that they would go over to a coffee shop. And who walks in? Tony Campolo. So while I'm waiting for him, Tony walks into the coffee shop. And Krista's mom Bianca goes, you're Tony Campolo. And he goes, yes. Now, I don't know if you know Tony, but he does this a lot. He spits when he talks. He'd make the ultimate 3D movie. He's a great guy. He goes, yes. And he says to Krista's mom, what's your name? And she says, Bianca. He goes, Bianca, that's a sexy name. He says to her. And they hang out at the coffee shop while I wait for him back here. Later on, I had an opportunity finally to talk with Tony. I told him, I'm struggling with this. I feel called. I feel like I'm not living out my purpose right now where I should be. And Tony pulled that old line, which you get probably, if some of you remember the old World Vision commercials. He did this. John, one day you're going to die. And when you die, they're going to throw you in the ground. They're going to throw dirt on your face and go back to the church and eat potato salad. And when they're eating the potato salad, what do you want people to say about you? Do you want people to talk about your titles? Or do you want testimonies? Do you want titles of what you achieved? Your success? Or do you want the testimonies of how you as a Christ follower changed the world? One person at a time. Folks, that's it. That's what it comes down to. What do you want to be remembered for? Are you ready to answer the call? In 2011, are you ready? Do you feel the purpose? Do you feel the call? Do you feel God saying, we have a job to do? At Trinity, we have a job to do. A huge job to do. Mark has called us to be world changers. Trinity has great needs. We operate, majority of people, on volunteers. Trinity needs you. What can you do to help Trinity live out the mission of the local church? And what are you prepared to do as an individual in your own ministry and in your own world? That is the question. If you are here and you're not a Christ follower, first of all, thank you for being here and joining us in the dialogue. But I say this to you. when I look at the call and the mission of Jesus and what he has asked us to do, I can't think of a greater thing to dedicate your life to. I can't think of anything greater when you look back in your life years down the road than to say, I have joined God to live out his plan of redemption. He has asked me to help lead and be a world changer. What is greater than that? Amen? Amen.